Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of From Page to Stage. I'm really excited because I've got a really special person to interview today. I'd like to introduce you to Pat Armistead. Now, Pat is not only a published author, and we're going to come on to that wonderful book she's on about. She's been creating, but she's also very creative in other ways. She not only speaks, she's an artist, a very credible artist in all sorts of different media. But we'll come on a little bit more about that in a minute. Now, that's just a little snapshot from my perspective. Pat knows her story far better than I do. Can you give us a bit more about who you are and what brought you to this stage in your life?
Yeah, thank you so much. Awesome to join you today in preparation for this big launch for you. It's wonderful. I always wanted to be an artist, and my mother said to me, well, that's lovely, dear, but I really think you should get a proper job. And so I never did go to art school. Instead, I went nursing, and I nursed for 20 years. Loved it. Never thought of being a nurse, but loved it. At the end of that time was burnt out, ended up in my own video production company. Nurses do funny things when they leave nursing.
Oh, yes, I've worked with enough of them over the years.
So during my nursing years, I developed my compassion. In my production company, I just developed a whole realm of creative expression. So 20 years in the first, 11 in the second, and then at the turn of the century, a series of losses. And I made some choices at the time, and one of them was whatever comes up now, I'm going to go to it. And with that intention just came a whole succession of coincidences, if you like, paradox, synchronicity. And along that pathway, just began developing a whole raft of ways of self-promotion that was very, very creative, you know, and a raft of it. You know, I always spoke. I've been a trainer. I did lots of training when I was in the production company, business development training, and now I'm using my compassion and my creativity to serve humanity.
Beautiful, beautiful. As I said, you've got so many creative outlets, and you're not somebody who can be held down, are you?
No.
She's fabulous, fabulous. The book that you produced, that was 2020, wasn't it?
The first book was, the one we're going to talk about today was in 2024, I think. No, not 24.
I was going to say this year, right?
2004.
Right, okay. So tell us about that one.
Well, the idea for that is called Antizac, and it's a fairly obvious play on Prozac. And I'm not discounting the way in which medication can be very valuable for anyone who's moving through difficult periods. But what I really wanted to emphasize was medication alone is not going to help us work through the grief and reintegrate. You know, many of these losses, I know for myself, I was left in a very disintegrated space. And if I'd made the choices I made enabled my reintegration very quickly. Right. When I say quickly, it was still over a few years, but extraordinary movement forward by merit of my choices and really getting present to my life. I think I had been reasonably present beforehand, but now doubly so. And yes, you know, I made a big commitment that that my words would always be about my ex had left me amongst all those losses, and his parting words to me were, "No, I don't love you, and I never loved you." We'd been together 20 years. And I thought, well, if that's true, then everything I've ever known is not true. And so I disintegrated. However, my doctor wanted to medicate me, and I said, no, actually, if there's been a whole raft of things happen, I have every right to be in this grief space. She wasn't the person to help me move through that. And so I found another practitioner, and so began the journey. So Antizac is a play on words, and A is for, and these are the adjuncts I think you need either to go on the journey yourself or to use alongside any medical support you might get. So A is for amuse. So it's about attracting into your life things that will bring amusement. N is for enthuse. So creating or looking for things that do enthuse you and to stay within that place. T is for trust. We can do anything in a high trust environment. So I'm very strong on people seeking that out, whether it's one-to-one or in bigger groups, whether it's in business, to be either fostering it for others or to be seeking it for yourself. And to, people blossom in a high trust environment. I is for intuition, so being able to develop that. And my gift for that came through, I've been studying improv acting for 24 years now.
And fun.
And improv gets rid of the censor. So you remove the censor and you can be freely expressed. And in improv, there are no errors. And the rules of improv that I learned were first thought is correct. All players are equal. Nobody wins if someone tries to win. And you need to be ready to receive and open to give. And those 4 practices are a brilliant way to be in business as well as on the stage, if theatre was your thing. So that's how I developed mine. Zeal, being able to choose and stay in for a significant period of time, a level of energy that keeps you buoyant and is attractive to others. So, in down times, how do we attract and maintain that zeal? So I talk about that. A is for attitude, so choosing your attitude, and C is for creativity. And my GP, who looked after me in those early years, he wrote the foreword to the book, and he writes about the number of prescriptions that have been prescribed for antidepressants and how they're not solving the problem. And it's our disconnection from self and our disconnection from others. And the last 4 years has heightened that incredibly. So for way back when I wrote the book, didn't know that was coming, and it still serves now.
Even more so.
Powerful adjunct, yes.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my background, as I said to you earlier, is in speech pathology, and I worked in multidisciplinary teams. And the psychiatrist I worked with said, "Oh, I'll give you pills, but if you want to actually deal with it, go and talk to the psychologist. She'll do something about it. I'll just stick the Band-Aid on the top." Yeah. So absolutely, the digging into things, it may not be something that we would do, I'm going to say happily or even readily, but unless you do look in, you're not going to make that progress. You were mentioning about losses. I mean, I think a lot of people consider loss to be having lost a partner, having lost a family member. your experience was actually loss of a relationship, was it of a marriage? And I think that highlights the fact that losses come in different guises.
Absolutely. And we don't even consider all the rebuttals, all the put downs, all the times we're negated, times we've put a hand up and it's not been accepted, the bullying, the angst that can sometimes come up, but in business and in personal life, but I'm thinking more in business, the way in which people's expression is stomped upon, all of that contributes to grief.
Yes.
You know, we grieve for that person we used to be or that we want to be and can't find expression for. So many people I've talked to, I presented in New Zealand at a grief and addiction conference, and perhaps 60 or 70 people there, and they all spoke about a hollow in their gut. And, you know, one of the other practitioners that was presenting, he said, I see this all the time. He said, people are constantly looking outward for something to fill that space. He said, and of course, it's not out there, Pat. This is something we need to do, the inner work, to find the love for ourselves, be at peace with ourselves, no matter where we're at. And that hollow will begin to close in or fill up. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that there are people who have gone through serial relationships and managed to attract the same person over and over again in a different body, and forgetting that who's the common denominator here?
Yes.
Because unless you do the work for yourself first, you're going to recreate the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My next book is called, which I'm still writing, is called Joyful Empowerment. The Only Way Out is Through.
Nice.
And, you know, when you do the inner work, hard as it might be, it's been my experience, every time you get to that barrier, if you like, that thing you need to go through, it disappears, you know, and it disappears by merit of you facing it and moving through it. And all the lead up to that can sometimes be very painful, but it's so restorative, and being committed to do that, then that's helped me generate so many stories, because I began to own all my frailties. I began to own the doubt that I'd experienced over the years and what I'd done to overcome it. And sometimes it had worked and sometimes not. And there was just a rich array of stories there, because whatever the scenario was out there, I stepped out anyway.
Yeah. And that, as you say, it gives you lots of stories to illustrate your points when you're on stage, when you're talking about not only your work, your book work, but also other things, because okay, before we go on to that, let me take you back a minute. Which came first for you, writing or speaking?
Well, I'll say speaking, because I was a nurse educator.
Right.
And then in the production company, I presented a lot to businesses around marketing and advertising. So I had done lots of speaking and presenting through to 2000, when I began professionally speaking. And the urge to express more than with my voice came along with that. Yeah, my first two books I wrote in about 6 weeks, and it was just an absolute spill on the page. So we can, when the times are right, we really can get into free form and just find flow.
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting because the topic, as you know, for this podcast is from page to stage. And a lot of the people that I'm interviewing for the initial sessions are inspirations to authors who maybe aren't quite ready to speak about their work. So the idea is that I'm interviewing people who are both authors and speakers. And it's amazing how many people started on the speaking, went back to the writing, then have come forward again. So we kind of flip-flopped between the two.
Yeah.
But as you say,
perfect partners, I think.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And this is one of the things that I suggest strongly to the authors who go, my book speaks for itself. And again, does it? Really? How loudly? And to how many? When my experience has been when I've been working with speakers, particularly authors who have then spoken about, to, and from their books, you see the audience light up. Now that's on a physical stage, because when we did a book launch for one of the multi-author books I was involved with last year, we, excuse me, slightly indulging myself here, we hired out the lecture theatre at the State Library of WA, Western Australia, and the 6 girls who were based in Perth did a book signing and reading. And I had offered my services to coach them all so that when they read from stage, it wasn't purely,
yes,
sort of Muppet style.
Yeah.
The difference it made. And the audience feedback we got was, I'm going to pick that book up and okay, I'm here to support 1 or 2 of the people, but I didn't know everyone. But their chapters are going first because I can hear their words. I can hear their voice as I'm reading their words. They are literally speaking to me. And I think that's the power of, as an author, bringing your words to life.
Yeah. Cool. And there are all different pathways. I began, I had this urge coming, and so I approached one of the business newspapers and got myself a column there. So I had that column for many years. And then from there, various other expressions, but including my own radio show. And I think that was kind of pivotal. I had been studying speaking at another level. I'd been studying improv, more for speaking than for being an improv actor. Yeah. And then being able to, I'd studied NLP, a range of other things, and all of those things had been about, I want my words always to be a balm. I want no one to be hurt by any words that might come from me. So the radio, right, was kind of like the absolute fruition of all of those intentions, to be able to, because we don't have the visual like we have now, and you have your plan, often you have a guest, and you can move in and out from the microphone, and you can talk softer and lower and in a very mesmerizing tone, and the radio's background. And when you get shifts and change in what's happening on radio, people are going, oh, what's she doing now? And you can draw people in, and then having developed those skills, then they can go onto the stage as well, just to be able to take one step forward, and the audience will almost,
they will come in with you, won't they?
Yes.
Because there's that thought, hang on, what am I missing? There's that sort of conspiratorial element to it, and none of us like to miss anything. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, exciting stuff. So for you, getting back to, for you, speaking came first, then you went to writing and back to the speaking again. But as you said, you're a very creative person in so many ways. So you've got a program that you're about to start up, haven't you? That you're launching. Can you tell us a bit about that?
I've probably had it in my mind for 2 or 3 years, and really wanted to foster creativity, but not just to be able to paint or create in that fashion, but to tap into that inner wellspring that is our creative self. in whatever form that might take expression. And so it took me a couple of years to draw the threads together, but now I have. And so it's a 6-month program, and it's a NINA program, right? It's all about learning about yourself. And inspired a little by a talk I gave one time I didn't give the talk, someone else gave a talk and I was in the audience. And she was a statistician presenting all the ways in which Australians could die. Right?
Oh, lovely.
All the different cancers, shark attacks, snake bites, spider bites, etc. And it was not the most empowering speech, but she got about 10 to 15 minutes into it, and there were 100, it was a BPW meeting, and there were about 100 women in the room. And when she's about 15 minutes in, I thought, oh my goodness, these people that she's talking about, 1 in 6 with breast cancer, etc., they're all here. I kind of turned and looked behind me. It's like they're all here. And ever since then, I've had this sense of who's in the room. So if I'm going to mention the loss of my child, I know there'll be many parents in the room who have had the same experience. Breast cancer, just all those things. And so when we know all of those elements about our own lives and what's affected us, it's all reflected in front of us. We don't know the detail, of course.
I mean, you're saying about stats. I've used that similar thing myself when I've been in a group of people, and we mentioned that there's 1 in so many whatever. So I said, so we've got about such and such a number here. So statistically, you're potentially the one, and wow, that gets people's attention. I mean, stats can be really tedious and boring, but if you put something like that attached to it,
yes,
hello, wake up.
Yeah. And that's probably at least 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So that boring talk has inspired me no end for what she told me about the audience. I was able to recognize, oh my God, they're all here.
Yes.
They're all here today.
Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? When you can speak powerfully to your audience,
Yes.
You connect head and heart for you and therefore to them.
Yeah.
So powerful, so powerful. So this is your creativity program that you're working on, because that's the thing. I mean, you're saying that when we think of creativity, inevitably we think of media in terms of drawing, painting, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And I put my hand up to say, I'm not very good when it comes to perspective on paper. Camera in hand, pretty good. Wooden spoon in hand, and I can cook up a really good food. And that's where my creative happy place is. Plus I sing, da, da, da. But the point is, our creativity comes out in different ways, doesn't it? And I think if we can get past what does creativity mean to me, and those blinkered views, absolutely.
And then we've got all these threads, and I have a friend in New Zealand, and she's a horse whisperer, and when she's got a range, 6 or 8 horses that she's working with in a team, she says, you won't feel it, Pat, in all the reins, but I do. I know what each horse wants. So it's developing, that's just one element. So it's developing the threads inside yourself to such a point that you're really connected to them. There was a time, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, that I was asking myself, am I a speaker who paints, or am I an artist who speaks? And I found an old lectern and I painted it. And I thought, here we are. There's no differentiation. And for me, the two key elements that kept me vital during all the lockdowns were being able to continue to speak using this platform.
Mm-hmm.
And when the lights went on for someone in the room, yes, there's my moment. And then to be able to paint and create where I needed no one.
Yes.
And those two factors sustained me.
Mm.
So knowing that, I even had a blood pressure episode, and I was talking to the ambulance person about my art, and she said, "Oh my goodness, Pat, as soon as you started talking about your art, your blood pressure dropped to 120 on 70. And I'm like, there we go.
It's my happy place.
Yes.
Mm.
So, once we've identified those and really harnessed it, and a coach of mine in the past used to say to me over and over, Pat, you're not owning all of who you are. You just are not owning it. And I like that expression.
Yes.
It gave me something to seek. Like, what is it that I'm not owning? And what does that really mean?
Mm.
And, finally being able to get that has so helped. We're not always happy, but we can be really fully living in whatever emotion that's happening at the time, and whatever's going on out there. And I think finding, if we don't, these are my thoughts for the future, strategy alone is not going to get us through the next few years. If we don't hook into creative expression in its full gamut, then we're going to be lost.
Yeah.
We're going to be lost. There's just such an upsurge in the digital world. Older people are not going to slip into that as easily, and we need this other space to be tapping into the collective wisdom, using the wisdom of our elders, and traveling in the footsteps of others.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
the whole
very short way.
Individualized world that I think has got even narrower through COVID I don't think we've seen the half of COVID's impact, particularly on mental health. No. And I think that will continue to develop over the next few years. I think that its legacy is a little bigger than we are presently acknowledging. But so I mean, the course is starting. When are you launching your course?
Well, the end of May. People can actually join at any period, but I'll be having an official launch at that point.
Okay. Cool. Because audience, what we're going to be doing is we will pop in the links to how you can get in touch with Pat, how you can link in with her, and that could be on LinkedIn, it could be elsewhere, in terms of the best way of connecting with Pat. We'll have all of that information in our show notes. But as you can tell, this is one very creative lady in multiple different media. So do go and check out what she's up to. Your principle of joyology, I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, if you would.
It came about as a result of all of those losses. I ended up going to a grieving seminar, and after the grieving, I was sitting with 400 people who had lost their children. And I lost my first child, a daughter, and she was buried as baby Armistead. And the presenter was coming along the front row and asking parents what their child's name was. And I thought, oh dear, I hope he doesn't ask me, because I never gave her a name. So, I mean, long story there is I did have a naming ceremony and gave her a name. But 2 hours after that event, grieving ceremony, go home and there's a note from a magician in South Australia inviting me to bring laughter workshops to New Zealand, where I was living there. And in the conversation with him, where he's having me killing myself laughing, but not telling me any jokes, he's telling me about laughter yoga. There was just this little lull, right? Just a moment. And in that moment, I don't know where it came from, but a voice said to me, oh my God, we've got radiology, pathology, hematology, but no joyology. I'm going to be a joyologist.
Brilliant.
So there
that was your eye from Antizac speaking, your intuition.
Yes.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. So that's where joyology was born.
Yeah,
beautiful.
It took some time, like I was saying, to harness what does this mean? Like it didn't come with a toolkit, so it was the first. It was the world's first. So I had to draw the threads from the past and create a new, and then bring all of those together to create my IP and a framework for my business.
So the joyology is also coming into your new program?
Yes, I didn't learn about joy by studying joy. I learned about joy through my experience of shame, grief, and embarrassment. And I have a peculiar knack of being able to show beauty where it appears there's none. And, we all have this idea factory here, but so many of us, it's not fully expressed. So to be able to tap into, what's the thing that lights the flame that gets that going. And it's many faceted, of course, and not every element that I will talk about in the program is ideal for every person, but the whole thing fits together and just allows this unfolding.
Beautiful, beautiful. What was the name of your program again?
It's I've been playing with the name, sorry. It's Future Flourishing. Future
Flourishing, love it. And is it aimed at any particular audience, any demographic that you're looking at?
It's probably primarily women, though there's nothing to say men can't do it. Women just seem more inclined to be taking this kind of path. And, business leaders, anyone in a leadership role, whether they're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a health practitioner, working in their own small practice, to just to broaden and enhance how they relate and create and make their delivery more expansive and more meaningful. We're meaning-making machines. So to be able to bring meaning alongside whatever it is that you're delivering is just the bedrock of fulfillment, I think.
Absolutely. That's a reaction that I get when I'm really excited about something. So thank you very much for sharing that. The audience for this podcast, our audience tends to be authors who are maybe a little reluctant to get on stage. And one of the things that I find, you were saying about, are you a painter or are you a speaker, or which one comes first, which is your priority? I find that a number of the authors go, I'm an author, I'm not a speaker. Do you know what? You can be both. It's not an either or. And I would suggest it's even a both and, in order to get your message out to a wider audience, as we were saying earlier on. So for you, when you've been doing your stage work, whether that be the around specific your book stuff, when you were doing your production stuff, when you were doing your presentations. How do you bring those words to life? Have you got any tips that you could share with a reluctant author?
Well, I think in the beginning, I didn't know what joyology was going to be. So I gave probably 100 or 200 free presentations. If anyone stood still long enough, I talked to them. And what that helped me do was polish, refine, and bring together. And of course, I saw a lot of those initial people were people with chronic pain, disabling conditions, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, all those chronic painful conditions where people found this relentless pain. And so, I used humour to shift people out of that. And then post that period, I was able to, I've delivered over 1,000 keynotes, and over time, I've just got this, I've got what I've written in my books and what I'm about to write, but it's like there are compartments up here now, and I know I've got, if I tell that, that's an 8-minute story. If I tell that, that's just 3 minutes. And often at the end of a keynote, I'm able to say, 8 minutes out, usually, I'll ask the audience, are there any questions now before I go to my closing piece? And someone may or may not put their hand up, and you can always orchestrate that by giving 3 people notes.
Oh, yeah.
And say, please ask me that if no one else does.
Yes.
And this one day, a group of women and a woman in the front row, she said, Pat, I so would like to know more about your tour with Pat Adams. And in that moment, the audience just moved forward. And I thought,
what?
I just knew immediately I can't finish with the funny that I was going to finish with, because most of that tour was very poignant. Funny, but poignant. And so I finished telling an 8-minute story that I knew I had to this woman, mainly addressing her in the front row, but everyone else had leant forward and stayed there while I told that story. And I got a standing ovation. And, so this is where the two come together, to be able to trust now that what you've written is internalized enough in your head. You've got pockets of stories that you can, like if I'm looking at a keynote, the business will want something, and I'll go, all right, I can pull from all of that and put this together. And yes, when you're really sure of your work, then that just comes through very easily. So, the confidence that you might not have had so much speaking comes as a result of the audience is going to require it of you. If you have a book launch, if you travel and want to talk about your book, then you need to have at least a 15 to 20-minute presentation ready to roll. And then you might find, right, I actually need a couple because I could talk about 3 elements in the book. So there's 3 different presentations.
Yeah.
And then your like for me, my experiences with life along all of that pathway are the source of my books. When I got present to my life, I stepped out in intention and things happened. And
that's a story I can use.
Yes.
That's a story I can use. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So for you, if forgive me for paraphrasing, for you, it's a case of knowing your material really well and having the practice, because the more you do it, the more familiar you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
And trusting, it's like once you've got your plan and you follow it, you follow that, of course. But your opening and closing sequences for your presentations need to be the things that go pop. And trusting, you know, I could nearly guarantee if I arrive 2 hours before a conference starts and I'm engaging with the audience, talking to them, the minute I hit the stage and start, I can say, do you know, I was talking to Mary from such Sydney not an hour ago, and we shared this, you know. So you got immediate capture
yes.
by just merit of your relating and engaging with the audience. And I had one conference facilitator say to me, she said, Pat, I have never had anyone come who has engaged so freely with the audience and participated at each table and walked around. She said, so many come 10 minutes before, get on the stage, boom, and off they go. And she said, people are just abuzz everywhere. The fact that you connected, you shared, and you know, you were with them. You were with them.
The point is, whenever you're speaking, it's always the what's in it for me, isn't it? You put yourself in the position of the audience, and the audience want to know you, not just what you're saying. They want to have that connection, head and heart, as we were saying earlier, with you as a person. So you invest the time in them, and suddenly they go, oh, well, if she's prepared to invest the time in me, then hello, a bit more. Exactly.
And sharing, I've got a lot of stories that are a little bit vulnerable, about vulnerable periods. And I know now when I share those stories, someone's going to come afterwards and say something to me about it. I had one woman come forward and she said, oh, Pat, she said, I want you to know my family and I sat at the table last night and we decided we've done all we can. We're going to have to let the house go. She said, but when you shared the fact that you've started speaking, doing really well, got a nice little sports car, written your first book, but you're still living in your overdraft. She said, when you shared that, she said, I cried because that's where we are. Different story, but that's where we are. And she said, and you've done all these amazing things, and what a vital and alive expression you're giving. She said, so I'm going home and we're going to sit at the table again. And she rang me about 6 weeks later and they had made something happen. You know, and they're the moments for me. It's like the more you can share from that power, time when you were powerless, time when you were at your wit's end, for how you'd hold things together, then they're there in the audience and they want to know.
Yes, because that it is, you're not some guru on a stage that is never, I'm never going to get there. Why should I even bother? Whereas if you can say, well, look, I've actually been in your situation, not the exact same situation, but something similar, and this is how I got out of it. And that's the basis of the majority of the audience that our authors do, because they're putting their heart and soul into writing their vulnerable story. And then it's the case of, oh, you want me to talk about it? That's really confronting. And when you hear your own story coming out of your own mouth, which is why when I work with those authors, I'm very careful. I'm very keen on my own duty of care. And I work with them to be able to express their story in a way that doesn't re-traumatize themselves.
Yes.
Because obviously, why would I share my traumatic story if it's only going to make me feel worse again? So yeah. Cool.
I love actually, Anthony Robbins is one of the few people who has, well, over all these years, and says now very publicly, I am not your guru.
Yes.
We have placed him there as the guru over time. And yet he demonstrates every time he, takes somebody through a coaching process, is not, you know, it's none of this is rocket science. We've just drawn it together and coordinated our experience and given it some meaning, so that others might benefit from it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Knowing full well we're all moving through life.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Back to your compassion moment again, isn't it?
Yes.
So we kind of come full circle. Thank you so much, Pat. Is there anything I've missed off?
One of the things you did have written down was any nugget of wisdom.
Well, that's where I did with the last question. So that you were saying about having all your stories to hand. Was there something else you wanted to add on top of that?
I was just going to say I've always, well, not always, but for well over 25 years, worked to a 90-day plan, and it's a backward plan. And the first action of the plan is to begin with the end in mind. I remember many years ago, I applied and won the New South Wales Tourism Award with my production company. And the first thing I did was write the speech I would give on the night. And then I did a 90-day plan backwards.
Love it.
Then you need to establish a circle of influence. Just draw a big circle, put 20 key people in there who could serve and prosper you, and whom you could, you know, be doing the same for each other. Do one thing a day to get you towards where you want to go. So over 90 days, that's 90 things, very powerful. You might do more than 90. And then you need to ask yourself a question each day that has you linked to whatever your biggest purpose is at the time. And mine has always been around how does this help me forward my game? Whatever my game is.
This help me forward my game. Lovely. It's those powerful questions. I mean, going back to Tony Robbins' comments about the fact that the quality of your life is dependent on the quality of your questions.
Yeah.
And that inner work again. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Pat. There's been so much wisdom that you've shared with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And your wonderful expressions in so many different ways. It's not one thing or another. It's a multivarious, faceted diamond of creativity that is you and is everybody. If we own, going back to your point, that we own what we are good at, our zones of genius. Beautiful. Thank you very much, Pat, for sharing your from page to stage.
It's been a delight to meet and talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. For now, bye from us.
Bye.